How we are doing, folks. I hope we are having fun. Welcome to our next module. This is co-creation of value. There was a time period where this course ended with this module, and I actually even called the course co-creation of value. And really, there was just too much more stuff since the last couple years, so this isn't where we end at the semester, but this is a pretty solid module. So the co-creation is where the firm and the consumer have the two-way communication. So whether it's R&D, whether it's innovation, whether it's product creation, whether it's on marketing campaigns or testing or A/B testing, this is where this co-creation idea came from. It's not all the firm one way delivering value. The consumer participates in creating the value. And there was a multitude of examples in these articles this week. The first time I saw this co-creation concept was in a book from 2004, way before its time, and none of it was tech-oriented, believe it or not. I think this theory fits really, really well in today's climate, bottom-up, tech-driven world. You definitely could see it in the articles that we've seen here. And unfortunately, C.K. Prahalad, big-time professor from Michigan, passed away a number of years ago. But his co-author, Ramaswamy, continued writing the articles. And as you can see, he was the co-author of this article. And, we're going through there. Okay? Let me close that out. Let me close this one out too. Let's get to some questions. So we are starting off with the Ramaswamy and Francois article. The article proposes that the time has come for a democratic approach in which individuals are invited to influence the possible enterprise partnership of their debt. Are UA's businesses possibly challenged by this idea because of how politics are framed as socialistic? Perhaps you're thinking of current political climate. I think U.S.-based businesses does this more than any other business, to be honest with you. I see more co-creation of value examples happening with U.S. firms and U.S. examples than I do outside of the U.S. So I'm not sure we're on the same page there. Are there other particular industries, activities, or functions that are not particularly suited for co-creation? So co-creation, that two-way, usually happens when we are more bottom-up and the firm is more externally oriented and there's lots of learning going on. But there are industries where this does not work well, and this usually tends to be in highly regulated or highly government-controlled industries. Government, for one. Politics tends to be one way. Government tends to be one way. There is little to no co-creation happening there. A little bit, but on the fringes. Legal, yes, primarily one way. Not that much co-creation going on there. Medical, pretty much one way. When there are higher regulations or standards for inclusion, law, medicine, even education, and education is very much influenced by government and state government, these tend to not fit co-creation well. So in other words, there's barriers. According to Porter's 5 forces model, there are regulatories or some kind of barriers to entry or influencing business practice. Why is co-creation a concept? Banks, by the way, another highly regulated financial industry. Why is co-creation concept that is often so overlooked? Do executives feel that they lose their power in controlling interactions? And given an opportunity environment that could lead to changes? It's so overlooked because in order to have a co-creation firm, you need to be market-oriented, and you need to really have that CRM mentality. If you think of what co-creation is, you think of that graph that I just showed you. It is a major extension of CRM. Really. It's CRM cubed. Well, very few firms have the right culture and philosophy to do the CRM right. how are they going to get the co-creation of value if they can't even do the CRM right? Firms have to be externally oriented towards competition and customers, or they're never going to get the value of co-creation. And then if they have silo issues that prevents the communication, then guess what? They still can't do co-creation. It's hard. It's very hard. What are some industries and firms that do not benefit from a co-creation strategy? Answered that one. How could they break through the barriers like IDC did and built engagement platforms? Well, some of them can't break through those barriers because they are regulated. Most of the barriers are self-imposed. Inward lurking, not learning organization, not market-oriented. Use CRM as not philosophy but software. It seems as though most businesses, as the article touches on, are mostly interested in themselves. Correct. And they want to make their own decisions out of stakeholders. Correct. These are also the firms that are afraid of social media. Because why? Because then you have to dialogue with a crowd. Which business do you think are implementing a change in a different direction? Well, we're starting to see some businesses that are doing more co-creation. I mean, we saw a Nike example here, and Nike's on the fringes of it. But really, I think Google is really good with using the data and A/B testing to, every time you hear the word beta test, think of it as co-creation of value. And who's doing that more than anyone else? These are the tech firms. These are the leadership Y firms. These are the Googles of the world. These are the Facebooks of the world. They tend to be doing more co-creation of value because by definition, they have a Y business. How can companies move from customer-centric initiatives to include both stakeholders and customers in the best interest? They need a communication platform. They flat out need a communication platform. What could it be? Could it be a blog? Could it be email? Could it be something more complicated such as Salesforce? But there needs to be some kind of collaboration tool. I just mentioned a couple. The one that I didn't mention, you need to talk about the social media listening tools also, because this is a way for us to listen and collaborate with a crowd. Whether they know we're listening or not, or want to participate or not, is another story, but I see the social media listening tools like Hootsuite and Radiant6 and Trax and Brand Mention and Sprinkler. These are all incredible collaboration tools. So we talked about silos. Yes. What about business silos? Whether it's a functional silo or a business silo, it's still a silo, meaning the silo's inward looking, they're protecting turf, they don't like outsiders, and they have their own processes. It's almost like their own little entity. Do you think it is difficult to build a co-creative environment if only certain departments or individuals have access to certain levels of data? Absolutely, positively, yes. If you do not have that cross-functional communication, you are not going to have co-creation of value. Why not have the entire organization freely share access? Yeah, I agree. You're preaching to the choir here. You're asking me, and I'm an open bottom-up kind of guy. Can co-creation exist within a business-to-business function, B2B setting? Absolutely. It's actually easier, I think, in a B2B setting just because of the CRM philosophy. B2C, other than the Netflix of the world and the Amazons of the world, not that many people have the algorithms to be able to do it on a B2C level, even though it's possible. But on a B2B level, think of last week with the articles and what GE does. Both the locomotives and the aircraft engines. To me, that's co-creation of value. Nike ID is an example of how consumers design products. What else did Nike do with suppliers and other stakeholders to realize co-creation? Well, Nike ID is something that they did within their own stores and on their website. And they are customizing it. There are certain levels of customization of product. And they're only customizing it in terms of color. Basically, you get to pick your own color styles. But we can do better than that. I will send you this article. This is from Dan, classmate. And he found this Kickstarter campaign. And guess what? You can get your custom sandal size U. Download the app. You laser image your feet. Wait a week. And for as little as $95, guess what? It is completely customized to your feet. Now, to me, this is co-creation of value. Brilliant, 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 brilliant stuff. Nike is just camouflage or basic. All they're doing is changing color schemes. They're not changing the sizing to your feet left and right. All right, very good. We're on the theme here, using the crowd as an innovation partner. The article cites Ford's collaboration efforts to provide more demand and value for its products. How's Ford succeeding in efforts since this article's writing? Ford's been fine. I mean, this is 2013. Ford was the only Detroit auto company that did not go Chapter 11 in the financial meltdown. They actually started their process of being more customer-oriented and being more efficient and lean in 06, 07, 08, 09. They took no government money. They were the only company. Still doing okay. I mean, their small car, I'm trying to remember the name of the small car, is the same car globally. Talk about efficiencies. On the surface, it appears that crowdsourcing is a good way to address general topics. I agree. Such as those discussed in a classroom or an industry conference, but is less suited for those that address specific business problems of an organization. Is this an accurate description? No, I don't think it is. Is this the article that... ways to crowdsource, right here, there are multiple different ways to crowdsource. It's not about creating demand. Research, R&D is not really creating demand. To me, when I see creating demand, this is more like an advertising vehicle. And that's not what co-creation of value is. That's not what this dude is trying to do. He's not creating demand. He's creating, with your input and your data, the most perfect product for you. I don't know if you want to call that demand or not, but I wouldn't call that demand. It's much more than general topics. Much more. Crowdsourcing. One main advantage is cheap labor. No. I'm not with you there. Does this mean the results produced are less credible? No. We're not on the same page here. Do you think crowdsourcing could take a more challenging task in today's companies? Of course. It's not cheap labor. The main advantage is the wisdom of crowds. There is knowledge beyond what is inside your institution. Here. Oh, no. Where is it? Oh, here. This is a spectacular crowd book. It is one of the foundational crowd books. And this paperback is 2005. I think this was written originally in 2002. This is a crowd book that is not a Web 2.0 book. This talks about the power of crowds without having to talk about technology. Now, this one, crowdsourcing, is the one that does, I've read this one too, this one's spectacular, does talk about Web 2.0 and using technology from crowds. Really, really, really good. What are the other good ones here? Well, Clay Shirky is a big-time writer. I don't know about this book. See if there's any that pop up that I've already read. No, let me go back to this book, see what recommendations are here, because I know I have more than one crowd book. Oh my God, Amazon, you are failing me. Oh, that's not a crowd book, but Richard Thaler is really good. There was that article in your packet about with Thaler. I'll come up with more crowd books if this is something you really, really, really are interested in. But this one is an absolute gem. Absolute gem. And this one talks explicitly about technology and the crowd. Is there one country or culture that has more success with crowdsourcing? Maybe not an official definition. It tends to be more individualistic cultures, and it tends to be more cultures that are high in tech. Some of the best examples are coming out of the U.S. and Western Europe. In your opinion, what is the best form of crowdsourcing concept? Okay, it's not which is best. It depends on what your goal for that particular thing. A contest isn't great for R&D. It depends on what your goal is, and depending on what your goal is which one of these collaborative tools would you use. In which situation is it more beneficial to use a crowdsource approach when it is better to use a traditional model? I don't know in any situation why you would ignore the crowd. We are in a bottom-up world. I lean towards tech, Web 2.0, and co-creation of value. I would never ignore the crowd. There is some caveats with that, which there's more questions coming up, and I'll come back to this. But I don't see one reason whatsoever why you would ever ignore the crowd. It's more data. Why would you ignore data? While careless use of information can increase the risks associated with data protection and a company's reputation, do you think the overall benefit of crowdsourcing outweighs the risks of the technique? Absolutely, positively, yes. I think the biggest risk with crowdsourcing is competition can be part of the crowd. That's the biggest risk with crowdsourcing. Not careless use of information, it's just that other people could be listening. Will focus groups cease to exist now that crowdsource is an effective tool? Absolutely, positively not. Focus groups can go deeper. Crowds go wider. Crowdsourcing is better at a particular singular item with little depth. Focus groups are all about depth. They're different tools for different applications. One does not replace the other. It's very difficult with a large crowd, especially a digital crowd, to go deep. It's more like narrow. It seems risky and even unnational to push problems out to vast groups of strangers distributed around the world. Not to me, it doesn't. How can intellectual property be protected? I don't see any of the tech firms having problems with beta tests. It's still copyrighted. Where's the intellectual property issue here? I'm not sure we're getting this here. This is a very top-down kind of a question. How can a crowdsourced solution be integrated into corporate operations? That's a good one. This is challenging. This is a hard thing to do. Because, and we're going to get to more of these questions because it still hasn't come up yet. Crowd data is not absolute truth. If you want to look at this from a marketing research perspective and you put your marketing research hat on, crowd data is not probabilistic. Crowd data is not a scientific sample. It's a large sample, but it's not probabilistic. I think it's the easiest way to say it. In other words, these are quasi-scientific tests, meaning you should find knowledge through the crowd that should be further tested to confirm and verify. It's not absolute truth. That's where firms get themselves into trouble. If you just rely on crowd data, you're going to have a problem. But if you use crowd data as one of the data points on your investigation into something, you don't do all your R&D through the crowd, but why not include the crowd as part of the 5, 6, or 7, or 8 data points to be included when you're making the overall decision? Is investing... community problem. So if I'm not mistaken, this article... both these articles were from the same issue of Harvard Business Review. The issue was either a big data, it was a cloud, it was, there were similar themes across this entire issue. So if these two seem a little similar, then it's okay. Is investing resources in co-creation of value disproportionately risky due to its size, scope, and ambiguous nature? Size, scope, and ambiguous nature. All right? No. Is it risky? I don't know how you don't do it, to be honest with you. I really don't know how you don't do it, especially if you just want to use the social media listening tool and you're spending $100 a month, and that's it. And you're listening. It can be executed by startups, incumbents, and alike. Yes. Absolutely. The software tools to do community problem, it's very, very affordable. It's not size, scope, it's everything that we've been talking about this semester. You need to have the right culture and mindset at the firm in order to do co-creation of value right. Same thing we could say about most of the modules we've talked about this semester. This most closely resembles our CRM conversation because they are similar. How well do you believe colleges and universities nationwide prepare students to employees to embrace this whole brain mindset? Oh boy. You had to ask that, didn't you? Well, let's just say that you guys are getting a very, very strong dose of, even though it's Dr. Dano initiated, you're getting a strong dose of this bottom-up CRM, why leadership, co-creation of value mindset. Are there a lot of Dr. Danos out there? Let's just be happy that you're in my class. I'll leave it at that and be polite. Is there always an emphasis in our country's going to be well-rounded, but do you believe that the schooling systems are adequately preparing students for the bottom-up world? Oh boy, you had to ask. I'm going to be polite. I'm going to say no. And I'm not going to elaborate too much. We can talk about the whole feeder system of high school into college. We can talk about colleges. We can talk about MBA programs. I'm the director of an MBA program. But this bottom-up world is going to sneak up on so many firms, so many job profiles. It is totally upending marketing in every way, shape, or form. I don't think people are prepared for it. I really don't. And it is one of my jobs. This is my class. This is my thoughts to you. This is me being the tour guide. I am hopefully exposing you to something that you didn't think about ever before starting this course in January. Which skill do you think is the driver of co-creation? Analytical or engagement? Neither. The skill is listening. The skill is empathy. The skill is being helpful. You cannot co-create unless you are externally oriented and you want to listen and you care and you want to be helpful and you want to provide value. I don't know. Oh, undo. Does the ecosystem and select industry call for an unequal balance? I don't know about the second half of that question. What happens if you try to plan out the structure of a co-creation system from inception as opposed to letting it piece together naturally? What's wrong with starting it from inception? It might be easier to do from scratch and everybody start on the same page and you learn as you go, as opposed to getting hundreds and hundreds of employees to unlearn something where they already get paid and they know. A company's profile would be the ideal candidate for co-creating. What company profile? Oh, okay. they have strong, rich data. Transaction data, social data, digital data, some kind of data, okay? They want to learn and provide value back with the data. They want to communicate and engage and have a two-way relationship. Basically, if you're an MO firm that does CRM right, and you're more leader Y because you care about being a coach, a mentor, a pedagogue, you have a higher profile, higher probability of being a co-creation firm. A lot of companies, even those entirely in B2B brick and mortar industries, are now in a Facebook-like business. The approach of community is universal. It's not universal. There's probably 10 companies for every one that is co-creative. 10 for every one. Might be higher. Do you think organizations should create separate departments that are centered around building a... No. Why would they be separate departments? I'm trying to bust all the silos. I don't want any silos. I don't want any departments. How does value generated through co-creation shared with externals? Well, it depends on what the goal of the co-creation enterprise is. Is it information? Is it optimization? Is it R&D? Is it branding? Is it sales? And why are people calling my house all the time? You know? Who owns the data that results from the co-creation process? Well, that's a pretty good question. It's a very good question. In most cases, it's usually the firm that's providing the ultimate value. You know, if you want to talk about this article, the next one, it's Unilever. One of the reasons why I added this is a 2016 article, but this is really what we're getting to. You know, we're doing co-creation of value to build an insights engine. And here is a very, very deep example of how one company, a consumer products company, built an insights engine to deliver more value, which creates more revenue, which creates more margin. The article states that in general, B2B companies tend to be more experimental than B2C companies. Why is that? B2B companies tend to have a better data stream. It's easier for GE to do this than it is for Coca-Cola. And even when Coca-Cola can have, 100 times the transactions of a GE, they're very, very thin transactions. In other words, there's not much data depth there. How do you maintain the effectiveness of a separate organization while not creating a Big Brother scenario or another silo? I know, this is weird. I mean, I like this metaphor. What did they call it? A brain? Had a nice... There it is. Page 71. The whole brain talent. There we go. I don't think it needs to be a separate organization. I really don't. And usually it's some kind of an org structure, org culture that it had to be a parallel group of individuals. You guys in your management courses, you talked about matrix organizations, where you have these people and you have these people, and it's sort of like a grid as opposed to a hierarchical chart. I don't think it has to be a separate organization. I prefer a very flat organization, very, very flat, no more than 3 levels to the C-suite, And if you have 3 levels of the C-suite, it'll be easier communication across the levels. There's less silos. And then it's much easier to do like a scrub team, like we saw in previous articles, that intersects between all various organizational groups. How can a company that is very competitive space, Microsoft versus Apple, make use of this process and involve sharing data and findings? Well, look at Microsoft. Look what Microsoft's doing with Cortana right now. And look what Apple is doing with Siri right now and Maps, and Apple Maps. These are co-creation of value examples. Cortana only works with data. Apple Maps, when it came out, it was terrible because they came out with no data They didn't have any user experience with the app. And, I've played with Apple Maps extensively because it integrates really well with here. But I use Google Maps extensively as well. And, it used to be Apple Maps, Google Maps, but it's... Apple Maps is getting substantially better because of the crowd. Cortana came out, and it had a lot of really goofy, nasty tweets, and people tweaked it a little bit, and you can go find those as topic talks if you want. But even Cortana now, in less than a year, is significantly better because of the crowd. What are the disadvantages of co-creation? I think one of the biggest disadvantages of co-creation is it's slower. When you have a top-down organization and it's very authoritarian, okay, this can move faster. Co-creation of value tends to not move quickly. Usually after it's established and after months and months and months and months and months of data collection and people using the data, examples like this, then the co-creation will never go away. But getting it started, integrating the data well and testing it versus the other data sources, because co-creation of value isn't your only data source, it's not fast. How does a company become consumer-centric with strong insights engine? Well, if you have a strong insights engine and you're not consumer-centric, if you have a strong insights engine and you're not using the data to be externally focused towards your customer, then you don't have a strong insights engine. Does it typically originate from in the C-suite? Usually because of the funding, and usually because it needs to be an organizational cultural thing wide. These things do tend to come from the top. It's usually a result of a company bringing up a consultant to advise. When the consultant comes in, it never sticks. It can bubble up in lower ranks. There are examples. Where the data stream coming up from the crowd is so rich and the story goes viral within the firm from one particular silo that it becomes a cultural phenomenon within the company. That's not as common as it coming from the C-suite, and it's not as common as consultants advising on things, and it never changes the culture within the firm because the advice is coming from outside the firm. Data synthesis. I think of data synthesis as more as an equation, an algorithm. This is last week. Okay? And I do not think that the co-creation of value replaces the algorithm. I think the co-creation of value is one or two of the data points on that 10-item equation for the algorithm. And that data across the various, remember we talked about diversity of data last week? Well, the co-creation of value data will certainly be very, 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 very diverse. So from across a diverse set of data, you build the algorithm. One of the data points is co-creation of value. What are the steps an organization should take to turn customer insights into business strategy? Oh, boy. Take Dr. Dano's class? I can't tell if you're laughing or not. It starts with MO. It starts with being a learning organization. It starts with being externally oriented. It starts with having CRM. It starts with the right leadership model. And it starts with really providing value. I mean, these are all articles we read this semester, and we read them in a particular order for a reason. How does an insight engine drive revenue at a company beyond providing content recommendations? What do you mean content recommendations? It provides R&D recommendations. It provides, valuable data to customers, the way GE does, the way they're coming up with new products. The only way that Unilever's been able to stay ahead of competition is through Insights, the CMI organization. What are some of the ways that a company can ensure that the gathering is clean data? Ooh, clean data. Clean data, good data, strong data. You test and you test and you test and you test and you test, and you never rely on one source of data. Can an insights engine be created strictly with the use of internal resources, or is an outside perspective needed? I think an outside perspective can help, but this is a cultural thing. It really needs to be, when this sticks, it sticks because of internal culture. How much should you rely on an insights engine? It was the last question. We finally got to it. Sometimes you might extract fake information or fake reviews or fake news, leading to poor strategic planning. As I said earlier, co-creation of value isn't the only data point. It isn't the only data source that you are using. It should be a valuable one, but not the only one. And depending on historical trends and data, you know how much to rely on the crowd or not. You test again and again and again over time. I don't think any data, even probabilistic data, is absolute truth. I really don't. I think it's one data point over a series of data points, and across those data points, we make a strategic decision to better strategic planning. Okay, let me wrap up. I have some links I'm going to be sending you. I'll send you this one. I'll send you this one, which talks about some of the software programs that they're using for this kind of thing. With regards to our Uber conversation last week, yes, you should delete it. I just listened to this podcast. If you want to listen to it, great. If not, just read the article. I'm going to send you this link to AI and the self-driven consumer. Really, this is everything we've been talking about this semester. You don't have to do this particular thing, but AI just means algorithm. This is, exactly what we're talking about. Co-creation of value. I'll send you this link too. And just for giggles and giggles for something else I'm working on, I'll send you LeBron. Even though it's nothing we talked about tonight. Okay. Thank you. Shoot me questions if you have questions.